Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Ian Cameron, Rob Vino with you, and we're here to break down all 4 NFL divisional playoff games taking place this weekend, and we'll also give you a preview of the national championship game in college football with Miami and Indiana taking place on Monday night at Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami. You would think a home game for the Miami Hurricanes, but with the way that Indiana Hoosiers crowd took over Atlanta in the semifinal round when they played Oregon, don't sell the Hoosier faithful short from sending a lot of their crew to Miami for that game on Monday night. But we'll get to that as well. Rob, football playoffs, how are things going?
Things are good, Ian. I was talking to you off air. The college basketball season since December the 1st, about a 7-week run now, has been amazing. So I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth there. The NFL playoffs, fine Saturday, not good. Really, for me, disastrous on Sunday, then good on Monday. College football, the last time we saw it was good to me with a pair of winners. So, we need to correct what happened on Sunday, but sometimes you lose by the hook. Buffalo, Jacksonville over 51.5, land 51, and I don't know. We'll get into it, but sometimes I need a little soapbox with these head coaching decisions.
Yeah, that game was it was one of these deals where it was just such a slow start, team stalling in the red zone. And, of course, Trevor Lawrence, they go for it on 4th down. His knee touches short of the line to gain for the first down when they were in Buffalo, right inside the 10. There were instances that points probably could have been scored that weren't. And then, of course, it just turns into a shootout. The one thing I've noticed, Rob, and I'll get your thoughts on this before we get into the individual games, I've been really feasting on these second half overs and these fourth quarter overs in these NFL playoff games. There's been multiple instances of just these games opening up in the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter. And in particular, we saw that last Saturday with the 2 games, high-scoring. Both games went over, but in the second half they did. The Buffalo-Jacksonville game, I cashed it a second half over in that game after the slow start as well. We even saw San Fran Philly get going in the second half. There's definitely been a lot of points in the third and the fourth quarter of these games, except I guess you could say the latter 2 games. Well, even Houston-Pittsburgh, because Houston just turned that into a blowout late, that the points came late. But second half and fourth quarter overs so far in the NFL playoffs, it's been a good thing to look at.
Yeah, and I think what happens there is the desperation sets in, right? You're behind by a field goal. It's the fourth quarter. We got to go. Hit the gas. No more feeling out process. And you're right.
Tempo increases, pushing the ball downfield increases. Yes, correct.
Yeah, and you saw, like you say, it happened in Rams, Carolina. Back and forth we go. Although that was kind of back and forth from the get-go. And then it happened at night. Chicago, down 21-3. We got to get going. Here they come. Next day, Buffalo, Jacksonville, you just talked about. I'll stop right there real quick, Ian, because I don't want to delay the show too much getting into the new stuff. But just to rehash the old real quick, it just never amazes me. You're up 7-3, 11 and change left in the second quarter. You've got 4th and 2. It's not like it's 4th and inches and you have a 6'5" quarterback. It's 4th and 2. And instead of going ahead 10-3, you decide you're going to try for 14-3. It's kind of the Dan Campbell syndrome now, which all these coaches get caught up in these analytics. We're just going to go for it. And then, you know what happens at the end of the game? Liam Cohen's looking for 3 points. He loses by 3. You had 3 points. Cam Little did miss a field goal, but you can't just assume that 50-plus yard field goals are going to go through the uprights if you're Cam Little or not. And, I just wish some of these coaches, when they have the motivational edge, don't give it back to the other side. Josh Allen, by the way, did turn around and march the team 95 yards in about 7 plays. And next thing you know, Jacksonville's losing for all their hard work. So I know we're going to continue to see it because that's the way they coach nowadays. But I'll tell you who didn't do it was Sean McDermott. He played it by the book, and he wound up winning.
He did. And it's a great segue, Rob. Guess what our first game is? It's the first game of the weekend. Sean McDermott and his Buffalo Bills as they travel to the Mile High City to take on the Denver Broncos. We've got Denver. Actually, Buffalo was a slight favorite at open last weekend. Now I've seen a flip of favorites. We see Denver 1.5 point home favorites here in this game, 46 being the total in this game. What else can you say about Buffalo last week? It was Josh Allen putting on the cape. You had to have it, a drive at the end, and he was able to make it happen. A big play down the field to Brandon Cooks. I got to give Brandon Cooks credit. A lot of people thought, the Bills basically picked him up off the scrap heap during the middle of the season, and he's come in here, and I think each game he's gotten progressively better and more impactful in this Bills offense. And a lot of people didn't know if he had much gas left in the tank. Well, he's showing he does have plenty of it in the tank. And I have a feeling they're going to need to lean on him here because the one thing we did see for the Bills is an injury to Gabe Davis last week in the game against Jacksonville. So now there's going to be some more shuffling at receiver. Who's going to step up? And that's been a sore spot all year for the Bills. It's just not a ton of quality depth at receiver. You're going to need, obviously, Brandon Cooks to deliver again because he was great in the win against Jacksonville. Sounds like Curtis Samuel could be available for the Bills this week. That's a guy that's been out for a long time for them. Mecole Hardman, former member of the Kansas City Chiefs, might be elevated from the practice roster to play in this game for Buffalo as well. They'll certainly lean in on the one play. They might be a little shy at receiver, but they're very loaded at tight end, and Josh Allen will lean on Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox at the tight end spot here in this game as well. And that's significant because Denver, they're slightly below average defending tight ends. So if you're into player props, that could be something to look at. This could be Kincaid and Knox involved early and often here for the Buffalo offense. Josh Allen, unbelievable job putting that drive together, putting them in the end zone to win that game. And, of course, Lawrence throws the interception to seal it. It was a weird I shouldn't be shocked. He's a tough son of a gun, Josh Allen. But let's not forget that before that drive, the Bills' offense was kind of sputtering, and there was an incident in the game, and we'll talk about this with the Rams later and Matt Stafford, and both quarterbacks, it happened to both of them, that they hit their hand on the helmet of a player, and it impacted their throwing hand and it hit their finger in which they throw the football with. And for a portion of the game, a good portion of the game, following that incident, Stafford against Carolina when it happened, he kind of went cold. He went on like some 2 for 10 run throwing the football, which was not good. And Allen kind of went through the same struggles in the immediate aftermath of him hitting his hand and finger on the helmet of a player trying to throw the football during a play. So that's something to watch out for. He also banged up his knee, in one of the run plays last week. So he took a pounding, even though the Bills survived and won that game. And he's just Houdini there with, taking a pounding, his knees banged up, his fingers banged up. He kind of struggled and at times in the second half, but when the drive had to happen, when he had to make it happen and put them in the end zone, he was still able to do that. So we'll see if he can, and we'll see how healthy he is. I mean, at this point, everybody's got some kind of nick and bruise, an injury at some point that they're playing through, but I think he'll tough it out. There's no question. When you look at that matchup, Rob, against Denver's defense, I think Denver, people have the perception they're a great defense. You start to look at them, though, down the stretch, and before the injuries to Christian Watson and one of their best offensive tackles, Zach Tom, in the game against Green Bay's lighting up Denver in that football game and moving the football up and down against them. We saw what Jacksonville, the team Buffalo just beat, was able to do on the road against Denver, up and down the field for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense in Denver in a victory over the Broncos. So when I look, and what was shocking too about the Jacksonville one in particular, the pass rush never really got to Lawrence in that game. So you got to hope that the Buffalo offensive line, and they've had their issues at times, but down the stretch, they've gotten a little bit healthier again. And Deion Dawkins with the left tackle was banged up, but he's back now and good to go. I think Allen could be protected here. And outside of Surtain is obviously the guy in the secondary that scares you for Denver. Outside of that, you have the potential here to make some plays down the field. Denver's defense, I don't want to use the overrated word, but I think they're a little bit more hyped than maybe perhaps I think they are as far as a quality defensive unit. On the other side, Bo Nix, second playoff start, Rob. I know you've mentioned it on the show previously. There was a time when all you could do was trust Denver's offense and Bo Nix against bad teams, against bad defenses, and that's where they feasted. Can we trust them here in this game against I don't want to say a great defense because the Bills certainly have their issues, as far as stopping the run in particular. I'm fascinated to see if Sean Payton's got the patience and the discipline to stick with the run game here in this game to open things up for Bo Nix. Don't get pass heavy again. And, we have seen some instances even in this year's playoffs where that's happened. Lean on the run game Trust it. Because by far, that is a huge question mark for Buffalo all season long. Even last week, even though they survived Jacksonville, there's ETN ripping off some big gains on the ground. The big thing I have to ask is, does Sean Payton have the patience here, to give, RJ Harvey a lot of looks, running the football here, and just dare Buffalo's run defense to stop it, and then let that run game success then open up the pass game down the field to the likes of Cortland Sutton and Franklin and the rest of that receiving core for the Denver Broncos. That's something to watch for in this game. Weather's obviously what you got to look at this time of year when you're talking about an outdoor venue. And we will talk about one specific game on this divisional playoff weekend that could have some weather issues. Doesn't look like Denver will be one of them. No rain, very little wind. I'm looking at 8-mile-per-hour winds for Denver in January. You'll take that any day of the week. And temperatures around the 44 Fahrenheit mark expected for Saturday. That's actually a little balmy, for this time of year. So, they're pushing the total down. I'm kind of thinking of bucking it, going the other way now at 45.5, 46 in this game. I know there's questions about Allen, and I know from a spot perspective, Buffalo got a bit of a disservice here, being in Jacksonville Sunday and now playing the first game out of the chute, divisional playoff weekend, early Saturday. That's not great. We'll talk about this. San Francisco got dealt a bit of a bad hand, too, from that perspective as well. But I could only look at the Bills' side. Bo Nix is kind of a prove-it thing to me with him. We saw this matchup in the wild card round last year. Now, granted, that was in Buffalo, and now Denver's going to get the game at home in their building here. But I got to see it from Denver still. And I get the feeling this is going to be a close game and game on the line. Who would you rather have as your quarterback with the ball in his hands? And for me, it's Josh Allen 10 times out of 10. And that's not saying Bo Nix sucks. That's just me saying that's how good Josh Allen is. And there's very few, if any, better right now in these playoffs right now, game on the line needing to make it happen, than a guy like Josh Allen. So right now it's Bills and over the leans for me. Rob, what do you say here? Bills Broncos.
Yeah, a lot of ground to cover here, Ian, but I'll start with a couple of things you mentioned. The ground game of Denver against the run defense of Buffalo. It's interesting. Denver's not a great run blocking unit. This is the best by most analytical sources that you'll find online that keep these advanced metrics numbers. It's the best pass protection unit in the NFL. And yet Bo Nix doesn't rank in the top 10 of quarterbacks. You tell me what the problem is. I mean, you have the best pass pro going. You're a mobile quarterback, which may add to the pass protection a little bit. But you're not in the top 10. I could name you 15 quarterbacks that would give anything to have this type of pass protection. Bo Nix, within a certain game, will throw balls where you say, my God, he's got a talented arm. And then there's other throws where you say, what were you thinking? Who are you looking at? Are you a one-read quarterback or what are you? So for Denver to stick with the run game, as you suggested, I think it's got to go good early, because if Buffalo stuffs it early, maybe Peyton does go away from it, especially the fact that it looks to me, I was looking at the injury report earlier, Ian, and Jordan Poyer is going to be out of this game now, which means there could be some vertical stuff for Denver open. You and I were talking off air a little bit about how little separation the LA Chargers wide receivers got from the New England D-backs. Denver's not a great separation team either. Cortland Sutton and Pat Bryant aren't beating anybody deep, and they're really not beating. Cortland Sutton is a guy who uses his size to come down with receptions, and generally speaking, he's their best receiver. Mims and Franklin are more or less gadget players that sometimes Troy Franklin's open deep. Sometimes Troy Franklin drops the ball deep, and Marvin Mims is returning kicks, where that's a dangerous aspect of this game as well. So for Denver offensively, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. I'll say this. They've had the extra week to get healthy. Do we consider it rust or rest? That's always the 2020 hindsight question. Defensively, though, I can't be in any more agreement with you on this Denver defense, which to me, and again, if you're watching the screen right now and you just look over my right shoulder, you see a Broncos helmet, a Broncos football, a Broncos helmet. I mean, I'm
you're a Broncos fan. I have to keep remembering
55 plus years. And it started back with the Washington game when they had to play Marcus Mariota. And Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury figured it out that they just went the quick game. Denver's a pass rush unit. If you let them get after you with that pass rush, you're in trouble. It is Josh Allen, and he can escape, and he's hard to bring down. But still, Jacksonville got to him a little bit. But Mariota, they put him in there and just threw quick, so that the pressure could never get there. Everything in front, yards after catch, et cetera, et cetera. Josh Allen can play that game, especially if he's banged up and just wants to get rid of the ball quickly to his wide receiving crew and the tight ends, as you mentioned. I think they can move it on Denver. I do. I think Denver can move the ball back because I'm not a believer in the Buffalo offense, or excuse me, in the Buffalo defense for 60 minutes worth of football. We saw it last week. They played good. Then they kind of caved. They did give up 6.6 yards a play last week, which by no definition is good. So Denver's going to get theirs. Buffalo's going to get theirs. I think, and you talked about the push downward on this total. And I really think the Broncos are living under a perception that they're this fantastic defense. And when you go down the stretch with starting with that Washington game, like you said, you'll find that this number that we're looking at this week in this particular game, currently 45 and a half, shop it as best you can. But the final game they played against the Chargers was a throwaway. Chargers didn't play anybody. The game before that against the Chiefs, they had a fourth-team quarterback out there. The game before that was the Raiders, or 2 games before that was the Raiders, who can't play offense to save their lives. And the other 3 games were well over this number. I said it last week. I'll say it again. Jacksonville walked in with the number 1 run defense in the NFL. Buffalo, number 1 run offense. Something had to give. Buffalo did not run the ball well, but even putting that into a handicap ahead of time, you always have the feeling Josh Allen's going to get his. No matter how it happens, he's going to get his. And they didn't run well. James Cook got hurt in that game a little bit, as did a lot of guys. And they still found their way to 27 points. Here against Denver, they're the number 2 rush defense. Jacksonville was 1. This is 2. I mean, even if James Cook gets 64 yards again, it's probably good enough to see the Bills get into the mid-20s at least, which would put me on over here, Ian, simply because I think Denver, whether it's through big plays or not, can get theirs. You talked about the short work week for Buffalo, so not a lot of rest to get healthy, and also the revenge angle for Denver, whether or not that comes into play, I don't know. But I will say this. Sometimes Sean Payton holds up that play calling sheet that's 10 miles long, and I just wonder, what are you calling off of that play sheet? Because some of it doesn't look pretty at times for Denver. I think it will get over, though. Like I say, I don't care what the defense is against the run, because Buffalo's still going to get theirs, and I think Denver can certainly get theirs against this team.
I mean, Sean Payton's a fascinating character, and apparently someone had to point this out to me, that this video clip that I saw a couple days ago of him was a joke, an inside running joke he's got with this young reporter who covers the Broncos. But I thought he was dead serious. I'm like, why you got to be such a prick like this? Apparently some reporter asked him about Dre Greenlaw coming back, how great he is downhill against the run, and then he asked the question, and the reporter asked how do you feel about having him back? And he says, well, what do you know about running downhill? To the report, I'm like, why you gotta? Who pissed in your cornflakes, man?
Right.
Jesus Christ! I mean, God.
Yeah,
I mean like, wow. But then apparently there's some running joke he's got with this young reporter where they jab each other during these. I don't know. That's what I heard anyway.
It's a guy who 3 years into his tenure still wants to take shots at Russell Wilson. Can you let it go? Are you 10 years old, or are you a head coach? I mean,
I heard that earlier before they played the Giants. I remember him saying, boy, I wish we could have played Russell Wilson, and he was still in there for this game instead of Dart. I couldn't believe it when I heard it.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a, well, we won't use the word, but nonetheless, we'll see what his team can do this week.
Not a bad football coach, but like you said, you're right. As far as certain things he says, a little head scratching for sure. Keep an eye on the status of 2 key Bill defenders before we move to the next game. Terrell Bernard, Ed Oliver. They're both on the precipice, maybe of returning, but they're both very much questionable. They haven't been for sure ruled in yet. Obviously, Ed Oliver would be a massive difference maker. He was playing so well before his injury for the Bills. And, of course, Terrell Bernard, the middle linebacker. That being said, I got Bills fans, tons of friends that of mine in this area, Southern Ontario, big Bills fans. They almost would rather not see Terrell Bernard return because they love the way the guy that replaced him played last week, Shaq Thompson, in that linebacking core for the Buffalo Bills. And he did. He played a great game against Jacksonville last week. But keep an eye still on those two guys as far as their status for Saturday. All right, next up, this is the Saturday night game, 8 p.m. Eastern, San Francisco, Seattle. Seattle, 7-point home favorites. Actually, a couple spots have 7.5, 45 the total here in this one. This is another game where Seattle, in January, got to check the weather. No rain. Kind of shocking that Lumen Field, it'll be dry on Saturday night there in Seattle, and very little wind, 45 to 47 Fahrenheit as far as temperatures. So couldn't ask for better conditions. That being said, for those of you that would be considering an over here, we do have to remember that these teams just met recently, and that San Francisco 49ers offense got completely shut down and bottled up by the Seattle Seahawks in that game, which decided the NFC West division title and the number one seed in the NFC back a couple weeks ago, 13-3 for Seattle in that game. Brock Purdy held to just 127 passing yards in that game. And Christian McCaffrey, who's just coming off a beast mode type of performance in the upset win against Philadelphia last weekend in the wild card, suddenly, in that game against Seattle, McCaffrey had 23 rushing yards on 8 attempts in that game, pretty much bottled up by Seattle. So I guess the question you have to ask yourself, and it was such a dominant defensive showing from Seattle, is you have to ask yourself what changes this time around for this San Francisco offense. Is there a pathway to improved production, and is there a pathway to changing the scoreboard result 2 weeks later after losing 13-3 to the Seattle Seahawks a couple weeks ago? I can't say enough, for all the, there's been some tough moments for Kyle Shanahan. Certainly some of these Super Bowl losses he's had, namely to the Kansas City Chiefs as a head coach. But he's also done a lot of good things, and he's also had a lot of quality coaching throughout his run with the 49ers. I don't know if it gets any better than what him and his staff were able to do last week. That's about as impressive as it gets. You're calling guys off the street to play on defense for you in that game against the Philadelphia Eagles last week. You see your tight end, George Kittle, lost for the season to an injury last week as well. Losing bodies, have been without Bosa and Warner for ages, missing key players on all three levels of the defense. Trent Williams, left tackle, played last week, but I'm not convinced at nearly 100%, gutting it out. And somehow, some way, here's the 49ers going coast to coast to Philadelphia, tough travel too, and beating the Philadelphia Eagles outright as an underdog. What a gutsy performance, phenomenal coaching, outstanding work by just an undermanned defense too for Robert Saleh to get that group, to play that way. I'm now convinced of it, Rob. I must admit, I thought it was a brutal, run for Saleh with the Jets, and it's just Jet syndrome again. You go there, you suck. You get out of there, you're good again. And I think that's what happens with Saleh. He's a good coordinator, goes to the Jets, can't get out of his own way as a head coach. He's fired, comes back to San Francisco as a DC, and he's showing you he's pretty solid coach still. Especially on the defensive side, just like with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers couldn't do anything with the Jets. Terrible run. And he actually goes to Pittsburgh this year, has some success, and gets in the playoffs at least. It's almost like your career goes to shit, and you just hit the decline when you go to the Jets. And then you get out of there, you're good again. And I think that's kind of what's happened with Saleh. But he did a great job. Shanahan did a great job, the whole staff. The question is, you're still undermanned. You're still very riddled with injuries. You're shorthanded. Can you replicate that again? Second straight week on the road, and now flying back to the West Coast, and on a short week because you played the Sunday late afternoon game last week, and now you're playing Saturday. So one day of the work week gets taken away from you because you're playing on Saturday night. That's the question. That's what's making me hesitate to take San Francisco. But I can't say I'm in love with laying a full touchdown with Seattle. And I hate to say Sam Darnold, but kind of Sam Darnold. At the end of the day, Seattle couldn't have been more dominant defensively in beating San Francisco 2 weeks ago. And yet, if you replay that game and you attach Seattle -7 to it, you're sweating your tail off, the start to finish, even though San Francisco could not move the football in that game. 13-3, you would have squeaked out a cover if you took Seattle at a -7 price in that game. That's what I kind of feel like here. Even if they play great defense again, is Darnold in the playoffs going to be able to move the football against? Look, I know it's a short-handed Niners defense, but they were short-handed 2 weeks ago and still only put up 13 points. It was the defense that won the game for Seattle in that one. So I can't say I'm in love with laying a full touchdown here with Sam Darnold. I still can't get the horrific memories out of my mind of the playoff start last year with Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings. Couldn't have gone worse for Sam Darnold against the LA Rams in that NFC wildcard game last year. And again, that was his only previous playoff start before this one here on Saturday night, and it was atrocious. It couldn't have gone much worse for Sam Darnold in that one previous playoff start. So that's got me pumping the brakes. I think if you grade out personnel, I love the Seattle defense, love the way they finished the season, but that stumbling block of Darnold in the postseason and remembering those vivid memories of last year at this time, I don't think I can do it at -7. Not at a price tag this high, not against a team that's as well coached, as the 49ers are. Albeit my concern with taking their side is the spot, which is admittedly tough. And does this short-handed group have one more rise up, pull up their bootstraps, gut it out, and find a way effort in them, even on a short week, traveling coast to coast? So it's a tough game for me, as you can tell, Rob. What do you think here? 49ers, Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm willing to take the Seahawks and lay 7 here, Ian. That game you referenced just now, the 13-3 had me pulling the hair out of my head because I had the Seattle team total over that night. A couple of things for Seattle. And you talked about Trent Williams didn't play for the 49ers in that game. He will play here. Obviously, he does make a world of difference. But the same, of course, not Pro Bowl, not potential Hall of Fame, but Seattle's been without their best lineman, left tackle Charles Cross, for a while now. And Charles Cross is back for this one, which means a world of difference for the Seahawks. In that particular game against San Francisco, they had 7 true possessions. They had the ball 9 times. But one was an end of half, kneel down, run the clock out. The other was end of game, kneel down, run the clock out. The 7 possessions in between that they had, 6 of those 7 went for 35 yards or better. They're up and down the field, 2 missed field goals, stopped on downs on the San Francisco 5, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of points left on the field by the Seahawks in that game. We'll see if they leave those points on the field again. For what it's worth, with Charles Cross back, and you heard this, I think Troy Aikman was on the call in the San Francisco-Philadelphia game. I can't really remember. I think it was Troy, because he was relentless.
He was on the call of San Fran-Seattle, that game on the final week. Okay. Last week, San Fran-Philly was Burkhardt and Brady. Yep.
Okay, so Brady was the guy who continued to say, San Francisco's applying 0 pressure. Why is Jalen Hurts so scared, so skittish in the pocket? There's no pressure. Stand in. Take more than one read. 1 quarterback sack for the 49ers in that game, 1 hurry. Sam Darnold's biggest problem is when you come at him with pressure, if there's not going to be any, and there wasn't much in the game, the 13-3 game. It was 2 sacks, 3 hurries in that game without Charles Cross present in the lineup. So you have to believe that if they can manufacture pressure, right? We could blitz from all over the place, and maybe that helps, but that's going to leave people uncovered, et cetera, et cetera. I think Cross back is a big deal. San Francisco is pushing to get Fred Warner back in this game. It's funny because you had said you got friends who are thinking, well, Terrell Bernard, why play him when we have Shaq Thompson? And the other thing would be Fred Warner, why play him when we have Michael Kendricks, who played great last week against the Eagles? But Warner's going to try and make it back. San Francisco did have George Kittle in that game against Seattle a couple of weeks ago. Don't have him anymore. Mike Macdonald, if I just match up what these 2 respective head coaches have done in 3 years, right? 3 years with the program. Mike Macdonald, Seattle, Sean Payton, Denver. I'd rather have what Mike Macdonald's built there. That defense is insane. And the whole entire concept of that defense from day one with Mike Macdonald was, because he came from the Ravens, his idea was, we're going to stop the run. And they put a blanket on Christian McCaffrey and told Brock Purdy, go beat us. And he couldn't really do it. And without George Kittle, I'm not so sure he can do it again. I think Seattle can blanket Christian McCaffrey again. Philly's letting them run wild down the sidelines on a wide receiver pass. Like, does anybody see 23 streaking down the sidelines? Dear Lord. So for me, I would say Seattle left a lot of points on the table in a 13-3 win. Probably should have been about 26 or 27 reasonably in that game. Didn't get it. I think they can get it here. If Fred Warner comes back, who knows what kind of game shape he's even in. I know they're pressed for players. Philly did not take advantage of 5, 6, and 7 numbers of linebacker starting in that game for the 49ers. I mean, I'm sitting around waiting for some intermediate passes to happen, and they just don't happen in that game. So Seattle probably won't let happen what Philadelphia allowed to happen. Philadelphia had short fields, didn't score, et cetera, kind of left the Niners hanging around. And if you leave them hanging around, heck, Kyle Shanahan's going to find a way to beat you. And he did. I think Seattle's probably good here, -7. I think the rest kind of helps them. And I certainly think that the addition of Charles Cross in that offensive line helps, not the run game, which in this case is two-headed. It's not Saquon Barkley, but it is Kenneth Walker and the kid from Michigan, whose name I'm missing now in UCLA. But they've got as good a running game, I think, and they've got maybe a little bit more diversity in the passing game. JSN has been terrific this year. Rashid Shaheed has been a good pickup, especially on special teams for them. So I do like Seattle -7 in that game.
All right, willing to lay it is Rob here with Seattle -7, and situational edges scream Seattle in this game. That definitely cannot be denied. All right, let's go to Sunday where we've got Houston, New England to get things started. Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern. New England field goal favorite at home in Foxborough. 3-point home favorites, 40.5 the total. This total very low. Love the Houston defense. How can you not? Played great, obviously, against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night. Just suffocated them, blew up the line of scrimmage, collapsed the pocket. How many times was Aaron Rodgers sacked in that game, especially in the second half? They just continued to just wear out the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially at the tackle positions, and got to Aaron Rodgers and eventually busted that game wide open. But if you're not playing an erratic, inconsistent Pittsburgh offense with O-line concerns and a 40-year-old quarterback, the offense on the other side of that equation for Houston played so poorly enough it could have lost them the game against a lot of other teams last weekend, or a Monday night rather, against Pittsburgh. I was very surprised how rough things were for a good chunk of that game for C.J. Stroud. I mean, just doing shit you can't do in the playoffs. I mean, just without one interception in the red zone there, I mean, it's just you cannot throw that football. And at the time, that was early third quarter, and Pittsburgh's still right in the football game, and still has a chance. But Houston's defense, over and over again, time and time again, bailed them out, stepped up with a stop, stepped up forcing a turnover, and just put basically Pittsburgh's offense in the straitjacket, a term that Kevin Harlan usually likes to use. But yeah, no doubt that is basically what Houston's defense did throughout that game. Now you turn to this game against New England, and you see the rookie quarterback here, or not the rookie, but Drake May now in his first playoff run here for New England, and it was a grind for him against a very good Charger defense last week. But bottom line is, after an early turnover, which really wasn't his fault, it was a deflected pass, and then it was intercepted by the Chargers. He did a good job of trying to, not make the critical mistake. And then when the game was there to be, to pull away and win that game and put it away, he made just a phenomenal drop in a dime, drop in the bucket throw, put it right in the bucket to Hunter Henry on that touchdown that really put it away for New England last week. But this is going to be a challenging matchup for the New England offense, and we know the Charger defense can be pretty good. And that was a grind, that was a struggle for New England to move the ball up and down the field in that 16-3 win. Their defense, as we know, just totally dominated the LA Chargers offense. I'll be honest. If they play like that, they could control this Houston offense. And what concerns me here is we're talking about the status now of Nico Collins, who may not play for Houston. And I have seen enough of C.J. Stroud and the Texan offense when Nico Collins has not been on that football field to know it's a different offense without him. C.J. doesn't have the same comfort and comfortability confidence in the deep vertical passing game without Nico Collins. That's by far his number one deep threat. And this is no slight on, Jalen Noel and Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins, and whoever else they're going to throw out there at receiver in this game. But Nico Collins is that important. Now, in some defense of Stroud, years past when Collins hasn't played, the Houston offense and C.J. Stroud's production has taken a hit. But one time this year, only once, has Nico Collins not played. It was a game against San Francisco in Week 8. And to C.J. Stroud's credit, he actually played well in that game. 26 points. He threw over 300 passing yards, and Houston's offense did enough. That being said, San Francisco, the team they played at that time, they were riddled with the same defensive injuries at the time that they've been playing with for most of the season. So, yeah, he played. Oh, that was one of the rare instances when I can remember off the top of my head, Rob, that C.J. Stroud and the offense have looked good without Nico Collins on the field. But more often than not, it's been much more of a struggle with him. So that's kind of where I'm at in this. He's that important. And normally I don't overreact to one receiver, because I find oftentimes we make too big of a deal of the receiving injuries, the running back injuries, when the O-line, the D-line, the linebacking core, and the secondary is every bit, if not more important, to the success of a football team. But it is very noticeable in his career with Houston, just the difference in Stroud and the difference in this passing game with Collins and without him on the field, that I'd want to know if he's in or out, certainly before I move on a side in this game. Because with him, I kind of like Houston with the 3. I still think the New England team kind of benefited defensively from a Chargers offense that's just, a mess with the O-line issues. Maybe we thought Herbert was ready for, to take that step in the postseason, and he wasn't. And don't underestimate the absence of Gonzalez in the secondary for New England. Didn't finish that game. We'll see if he's able to return here in this game for the Patriots. So it's kind of one of these deals where with Collins, I kind of lean Houston, but without him, I think I pivot to New England and land just 3 because, with the struggles of Stroud against Pittsburgh, which it was just really amazing to see how tough a time he had, in that game, and some of the decisions and some of the errant throws that he had. You do that stuff here against the Patriots, you're going to have a harder time overcoming them in this particular spot and winning this football game. So, like I said, with Collins, I kind of lean Houston. Without him, I think I pivot with New England. That's kind of where I stand. Probably as an under, but 40.5 is pretty damn low. See, what do you think here, Rob, with Houston, New England?
Yeah, this is interesting. We'll get into it. Just as we were talking here, Ian, I don't know. I'm looking at our clock here, 38 minutes. We've been going back and forth. Within that time span, a couple of things here. Fred Warner has been listed as out now. They're not going to try and play him. But how about this? Sam Darnold was just downgraded to questionable with an oblique injury for this game. Now, that makes all the difference in the world here if that is to be true. But for those watching us, for those that will watch this, I'm sure you may know about it by the time you do watch it if it's late tonight. But I had no clue that there was some sort of potential oblique injury to Sam Darnold until about 15 minutes ago. Probably less.
That's news to me too. Probably news to everybody.
Yeah.
What's that mean? Drew Lock would be in line if Darnold somehow can't play.
Right. Yeah. Right. So we have to keep our eye on that as far as that game is concerned. But right now we're talking about Houston, New England. So let's get to it. For Houston, what surprised me the most, Ian, was the way they ran the football. They ran the football well. Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, they ran for 164 yards or 154 yards in that game, which is probably the best rushing production I've seen out of that team all season long. In respect to how wide open the holes were, those holes were big, created by the Houston offensive line, which has been under siege all season long. Right? It's not a good offensive line. Pittsburgh did come after C.J. Stroud with pass rush time and time again. 3 sacks, 3 hurries. Stroud saw ghosts. Like you say, that pass he threw down the end near the goal line is ridiculous. To cough the ball up 5 times, fumbling is ridiculous. But I don't know that he'll have those same issues here. But I will say this. Mike Vrabel's going to see the tape, and Mike Vrabel's going to do 2 things. Going to tell his team, listen, they came out and ran the football down Pittsburgh's throat last week. It's not going to happen to us, even though their run defense has been extremely poor to close the regular season. It wasn't that against the Chargers. I guess, Ian, you could argue that twofold. You could say to yourself, well, they were not scared at all of LA throwing the football. and they just, in Bill Belichick fashion, tried to take away what they thought was the best asset of the Chargers, which is the run game, right? He could do that again with Houston and just say, listen, we're going to shut down the run. We're going to see what Stroud can do without Nico Collins. Last week, he targets Christian Kirk 9 times. He gets 8 completions. Maybe Christian Kirk can step up and be Nico Collins for 1 week. I'm not sure. But that's the way New England's going to look at it. And from that perspective, in Foxborough, man, I'm not so sure how much Houston can score. And I'm somebody who took Houston about a month ago at plus 750 to win the AFC, just based on their defense, period. And that defense is not what the Chargers was last week. And Drake May is going to be under siege this week. There's no question about that. And they'll need to have some holes for Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, et cetera. If they don't, Ian, if Houston does the same thing I just described to you, let's say DeMeco Ryans goes to the film and DeMeco Ryan says, they're not going to run on us. And we're going to see what Drake May can do with Keyshawn Boutte and company and Stephon Diggs, because we have D-backs that are as good as it gets in this league. And it was interesting to me, not that New England requires it, but it was just interesting to me in watching Houston last week that their corners, Derek Stingley just never switches sides of the field. He just guards one side of the field, Lassiter on the other side. We're not going to go find your best receiver with Stingley. We're just going to play you straight up. You send Diggs wherever you want. Whoever's there is going to guard him. Houston's that confident. They're that good across the middle with the linebacking core. You were right when you said 40.5 is a low total in modern day football. But I have a hard time seeing this thing getting past 20-17, in all honesty. And if Nico Collins can't go, I have even less ways to think of this getting past 2017. Of course, not handicapping for massive turnovers that set people up in short field situations, right? Stroud did it last week. I'm not sure he'll do it this week. I would venture to say that there's some pretty strong coaching points coming from that coaching staff this week to CJ Stroud, who knows he got away with one in Pittsburgh last week. So to me, it's probably an under. Obviously, with a Houston ticket to win the AFC at plus 750, I don't really have to bet the game.
That's right.
I can sit and root and watch, and I'll probably land on under in some fashion.
Yeah, it feels, especially if Nico's out, like that is by far their number one big play weapon. And that's not saying, as you mentioned, Christian Kirk did play well. And remember, that's a concussion that Nico Collins is dealing with, and you got to go through protocol and you've got to pass all the steps. Right. And now you got to do it on a short week too, because don't forget, you played Monday night and now you're playing Sunday. So that's one less day of ability to recover and be able to be on the field here if you're Nico Collins. And he wasn't at practice today, from what I read. So that's kind of an early telltale sign at the moment that maybe he won't be cleared in time for this game on Sunday. And it would be a huge loss for the Houston offense and for CJ Stroud, because I've just seen this movie many times. And oftentimes it hasn't been a good movie for Texans fans, that the verticality and just the explosiveness of the downfield passing attack, it just suffers greatly without Nico Collins for CJ Stroud. And this is CJ Stroud that last week, didn't play, played a very underwhelming game, if you ask me, last week against Pittsburgh. Now might be without Collins on the road against a defense that, obviously last week played great. And if they replicate that, points might not be easy to come by. All right, our last game, Rob, Rams and Bears to wrap up divisional playoff weekend. LA Rams 3.5-point road favorites, 48.5 the total in this game. Well, we've talked about 3 instances where, weather's not really a factor in Denver and Seattle, and in Foxborough, I'm seeing no rain and only 5-mile-per-hour winds. A little bit colder in Foxborough, 35 Fahrenheit, but not bone-chilling cold. And then we get to this game here in Chicago, and I've been monitoring this forecast like you can't believe all week long here with this Rams and Bears game, and I'm just looking at it day by day by day. I will say, it looks better today, Rob, than it did yesterday. Because yesterday I'm seeing, snow showers, rain in the forecast. I'm seeing the precipitation drop now down to 15 to 20% chance of any precipitation, which you would think would be snow, because game time temperatures are going to be in the 18 Fahrenheit range. It is going to be very cold at Soldier Field at the moment. At least it looks that way on Sunday night for this game. So I'm still just taking it day by day, and waiting to see what the forecast is closer to Sunday. But I can tell you this right now. I'm dying inside, dying to bet this thing over the total.
Right.
Just dying to bet this thing over the total because the Rams, 7 straight overs going back to the regular season. Easy over for me last week with Rams Panthers over the total, which, I thought, and that again, very similar. Where last week I was just monitoring that forecast like a hawk for Carolina prior to that game. And then when we got closer to Saturday, Rob, I thought, well, you know what? The wind's not going to be as bad as I thought. This downpour and driving rain that they were talking about all week, it looks like it's only going to be a few spotty showers. I'm like, it's a go for me with this over because I'm convinced both teams can move the football. No one's stopping the Rams right now. Stafford's been great down the stretch. But I've also said multiple times on the frenzy the last few weeks, why have I also liked the Rams over so much? Because this defense ain't anything to write home about right now. They are not. I mean, they're giving up big plays. They're all of a sudden letting teams run on them. Bryce Young, who's certainly been erratic and inconsistent and up and down, and he's chewing them up and spitting them out for a good chunk of that game, especially in the second half when he had to put a drive together to give Carolina the lead in the fourth quarter. No problem doing it against that Rams defense. That Rams defense is just, there's problems right now. They are not shutting things down. They're giving up big plays. And obviously the Chicago Bears team is an offense we think can have some success. Now, it took until the second half for all that success to happen for Chicago last week against Green Bay. But once they got it going, Caleb Williams got in rhythm. And what a day it was for Colston Loveland, the tight end. Incredible performance, the rookie out of Michigan. And then the run game with Monangai and Swift can become a factor. And that O-line, I think that's one of the marvels of the Chicago turnaround this year. It's not just Ben Johnson and the coaching. It's not just the quarterback. It's the O-line. We gave this O-line shit last year and 2 years ago, saying what a pathetic unit. What a pathetic, horrific, disgraceful position group this was for the Chicago Bears. It was a clear liability for this franchise for years. And now you look at, I'm not saying they're an elite O-line yet, but my goodness, the improvement that the Chicago Bears have had along their offensive line, it's been very impressive to see it. And like I said, you got to deal obviously with Jared Verse and a couple of those pass rushers. But like I said, the Rams have had issues giving up big plays. Not getting off the field on third down has become an increasing problem for the Rams of late. That I think the Bears can move the ball. I certainly think Matt Stafford and this red-hot Rams offense can move the ball. I still have issues and concerns about the Chicago defense. Let's not forget Chicago defense got sliced pretty good in the first half by Jordan Love and Green Bay last week, but then Green Bay went into idiot mode in the second half, decided to get a little too conservative and just, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, almost like they were nursing a 21-3 lead at the time home, and you can't do that. In the postseason, you got to stay aggressive. You got to stay your foot on the gas pedal. Green Bay didn't do a good enough job of that. Now you do have to tip your cap to Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator for Chicago, for some nice adjustments at halftime. But a lot of that was just a way too they throttled way down Green Bay on offense in that second half when they shouldn't have. I don't think Sean McVay would make that mistake in this game if, say, the Rams were up at halftime, especially knowing all of a sudden his defense is leaking a bit and giving up points going back to the regular season. So I just see this matchup where both offenses can have their way and both offenses can score points. My only hang up on it, Rob, is this weather forecast, and I'm hoping we get even a better of a report coming out of Chicago weather-wise closer to Sunday. And if it's even halfway decent, I am scared of the cold because I know it can affect the passing and the receiving because catching a brick football in ice cold conditions is not easy, where it just hits you and you just can't, grab it. It's hard as a fucking rock, that football. And it can be difficult to grab it. But if the weather's even just not much wind, no precipitation, the cold does bother me a bit because when you're talking this cold, less than 20 Fahrenheit, that's when it can be difficult to grip the football in conditions that frigid. That being said, I am very interested in the over, and I'm just waiting it out and seeing if we can get this best and just praying, really. Please give us a decent weather forecast for Sunday and the over, especially now that it's been hit down. And I get it. The weather is why this has been hit down 51 to 48.5. But I'll go the other way if it's even halfway decent weather-wise in Chicago Sunday night. Yeah, I'm concerned about the cold, but gosh, Hard not to think the offenses can have success. Rob, what do you think here? LA Rams, Chicago Bears.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ian, because we both are in the same line of work where we do provide client advisory services. But first and foremost, I mean, we're betters. And for me, the Rams Panthers game was the one that stuck out like a sore thumb last week. And then, as you mentioned, then came the weather. I still bet it over the total, but it's one of those where you end up kicking yourself at the end of the first half because you tempered your bet. At least in my case, I did. I tempered it because of weather. Wasn't going to get off of over, but I didn't play it nearly as strong for myself. Didn't recommend it nearly as strong as I should have or would have if I knew it was a dry track. Even if the even if the total was 2.5 points higher, I still would have gone over that total. Same here. I have the same feelings you do. Um, Two things here. I don't know. It's often we heard this about Tua a couple of weeks ago, right? Oh, Tua Tagovailoa can't win in temperatures under 40 degrees. But it's only the quarterbacks that people ever talk about, at least on a national level. Now, for me, I've heard Matthew Stafford say this week cold's not going to bother him. You're right. I see 12 degrees Fahrenheit. I see feels like -5. That's pretty cold, Matt Stafford. However, if you're throwing the football, I'd rather have Devontae Adams out there to catch it. He played in Green Bay all those years, catching balls from Aaron Rodgers. I think he knows what cold is, 12-degree cold playing in Lambeau. And the other side is Puka Nakua. And if there's a guy I trust to make catches in any kind of weather, it's Nakua. So they have the receiving core here. I have less confidence in Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, who are all great in their own right on better tracks and better weather. There's question marks next to Dunze and Moore's name. I'm still going to assume they're going to go. But if we're going to watch the game Sunday and see drop balls, I'm going to say Caleb Williams more apt to make the errant pass than Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford's receivers way more apt to catch it than the Chicago receivers. The other side of that coin is when it's that cold, who the heck wants to tackle anybody? And if I'm the Rams, and you're right, again, on a national level, nothing's been made, or very little, I'll say, has been made about how ridiculously bad the Ram defense is. Terribly bad. It's a one-trick pony. They pass rush, and if they don't get to the passer, they're burnt. So in this instance, you have to tackle Kyle Monangai, kid from Rutgers, or you have to tackle DeAndre Swift. I don't want to tackle either one of those guys if it's -5 outside. So the Ram defense, which is already bad and a bad run defense, out there in the cold, maybe on an extended drive where maybe Ben Johnson, who is a chip off the Dan Campbell block, and let's run it down their throats type of mentality. I could see it. And I could see success here. I could see holes for not just, I don't want to make it sound like Woody Hayes, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I would say that Chicago can break off chunk runs, break tackles, make 20-yard gains out of 5-yard gains, et cetera, which gives me advantages on both offensive sides, right? I think the receiving core is fine with LA. The quarterback is fine with LA. And I think the running game is going to be fine with Chicago. I don't really trust these Chicago receivers to make plays in this weather. And I don't trust Caleb Williams to be accurate I don't trust him anyway for 60 minutes to be accurate. Never mind in adverse conditions. I really do like the over here, Ian. If this thing would come up to, I don't know, I don't want to, pray to God and use up all my goodwill in one shot, but I would love maybe 20, 21 degrees in this game. And that would be fine by me. I could get in with the over at a really strong basis. I'm still going to play it. But again, it'll be tempered. And it's at the worst time that they could play it, right? It's nightfall in Chicago. It's going to be, I think, what is it, 4:30 at night, 4:30 to 8 o'clock, dark. It gets colder.
It'll be 5:30 to around 8:30 local time in Chicago when this game's going on. Yeah.
Crazy, right? I mean, once the sun goes down, just living in the, mid-Atlantic, I know what it feels like once it goes down. It feels 20 degrees colder. So I think over. I think you're, I'm with you on that. And I would probably say, this probably comes down to mistakes. I trust the Rams to make the least amount of offensive mistakes. Caleb is a little loose with the football at all times. And so for that reason, maybe I would side with the Rams, but I really want to get to over in a stronger way than I did last week. I kind of kicked myself for not making a bigger score on that game than I did.
Yeah, I know there's this narrative going on about the Rams' struggles in the cold, Matthew Stafford struggles in the cold. I don't know. I remember them going to Philly last year and giving the Eagles everything they could
In the
handle in the
snow.
playoffs in cold and snow. And it wasn't it blizzard, whiteout conditions in that game too
Right.
last year. And I thought he made a
Right.
decent account of himself in that game. And they kept coming back and they were driving to maybe win at the end when they got stopped late in the game. So I don't think he played that bad in the cold last year, Matthew Stafford. So I think they can be fine offensively. And as always with Matthew Stafford, pass rush is key. Chicago doesn't get pass rush half the time. That's been a problem all year. They've all consistently, even though they've had a great year, they've consistently been, below average pressure rate from their defensive front, Chicago. And that means Stafford should have time to find Adams, Nakua. And how good, by the way, is Nakua? I'm just amazed. I'm just dazzled every week watching that guy. I even forgive him for the drop, which I couldn't believe because he makes up for it with great throws. And the throw that Stafford made to Parkinson on the game-winning touchdown drive. I mean, you talk about ball placement and pinpoint accuracy. Doesn't get better than that. It's just exactly where it had to be to Colby Parkinson for that go-ahead touchdown against Carolina last week. Thing of beauty. I think they'll move the ball. They'll score points. Chicago should too. It's just a question of, again, just where this weather forecast ends up close to kickoff on Sunday. I think I would lean Rams to win the game. There, 3.5 in that one. But like I said, I don't know at the moment if I'm going to move on the side there in that one. All right, we'll wrap up, Rob, with the national championship game. We move over to college football, the last college football game of the season. Miami Hurricanes, Indiana Hoosiers, supposed to be a true home game here for the Miami Hurricanes, playing at Hard Rock Stadium where they play their home games. But the Indiana Hoosier faithful, they will travel. There is no question about that with a national championship on the line. Indiana, 8.5-point favorites, 47 the total in this game. This point spread's moved up. Clearly, there's a hesitancy for a lot of people to fade Indiana right now, and I'll raise my hand as being one of them. It's just, gosh, it's difficult. It's difficult. Yet at the same point in time, you turn around and you look at Miami, and what they've done here in the college football playoff so far. Knocking off Texas A&M, knocking off Ohio State, beating a very solid, an Ole Miss team that was really, on an emotional wave, if you will, and Trinidad Chambliss playing so well, and they got past them last week. I mean, this is a Miami team playing some really good football. The question is going to be Indiana, unlike specifically Oregon, and maybe even to a lesser extent A&M, because I do think Ohio State was supposed to be a pretty physical team. Indiana, they write the book this year on physicality, and you can see it with the way they run the football with their two great backs, and it just opens things up for Mendoza, who clearly has established one hell of a group of receivers that we have seen here in the playoff. And it's a multitude, a plethora of different players that can make a difference for Indiana. Obviously, Cignetti has done a phenomenal job from a coaching standpoint, but they've got everything you could want. The O-line's good. They run block well. They've been pretty good as far as pass protection is concerned, and they've gotten better, in my opinion. The Kalen Black, Roman Hemby tandem at running back's great. You got three big-time receivers, and Charlie Becker, Omar Cooper, and Elijah Surratt. So, like I said, it's definitely an Indiana team that can beat you both ways. And I think that was something kind of lacking at times from some of their other opponents. A&M, they didn't have the pinpoint passing, from Marcel Reed that Indiana's going to throw at you. Ohio State, when we saw with Ohio State, Sayan had a great season, but a lot of that was a weak schedule. Played Texas, didn't move the ball up and down. Played Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, didn't move the ball up and down, struggled with protection, and it happened again against Miami. Last week against Ole Miss, yes, they won, but Ole Miss was able to move the football at times and put up some points, made that Miami defense a little. I'm convinced of it. If Ole Miss had a little bit more time on the clock, there's a real chance that Miami could have lost that game at the end, because their defense was struggling with Ole Miss the later in that fourth quarter as that game went on. So I have real concerns, as great as that D front is for Miami, about whether they're going to be good enough to corral what's become this really, really strong, balanced attack that Indiana has to throw at them. I mean, I'm kind of more toward Indiana's team total than laying the 8.5. I'm pretty sure Indiana can move it. My question is going to be, what does the Miami offense do against Indiana's defense? And Indiana's defense last week forced a ton of turnovers, got after Dante Moore repeatedly in that football game. Carson Beck's done a pretty good job, though, for the most part, avoiding mistakes. We have to remember that. Now, can they run the football with Fletcher against this Indiana front? And we know it's difficult as hell to run against them. We know that. And if they can't run it, does Carson Beck have one more game of his life, largely clean, largely mistake-free football game that he can throw at you? If he can, then maybe you give Miami's offense a puncher's chance for success. If he does make mistakes now with a run game that might be silenced a little bit, then that's where this game, like many games recently for teams against Indiana, can get away from them. So to make it simple and short, Rob, I just have zero interest putting any money against Indiana right now. It really is that simple. I don't know what the number would have to get to for me to be interested in Miami. Maybe at 10 and a half, then maybe I get, the chimes start to be heard, as the late, great Dave Malinsky would say. But nevertheless, not at this current number. It's the national championship game. So, you got to bet it, or at least, even if it is a smaller variety bet. And that's kind of where I'm at. Don't have a super strong opinion on the game either way, but I'll probably be looking at some kind of Hoosiers team total over split with a full game. I think I might lean over at 47 here slightly in this game. And you always know with Indiana involved, you could certainly get those defensive scores if their defense gets after Carson Beck. And we certainly saw that. Hell, first play of the game before you could even get comfortable. And there you see them returning a interception for a touchdown, pick six against Dante Moore in the very first play last week, which pretty much set the tone for the game. So I just have no interest fading Indiana. Rob, what do you think here for the national title game on Monday?
Yeah, I thought last week, and not that it didn't occur the week before either in Indiana's previous win, but I thought that maybe the lack of not having Stephen Daly, Kellen Wyatt, two of the best pass rushers on Indiana all season long. Stephen Daly, I think 19 and a half tackles for loss this year. Not having them might show up. It didn't matter. That defensive front is insanely good. Miami's limited where options are concerned on offense, right? You got to be able to run Fletcher. I don't know that they can run Fletcher against this run defense. I really don't. I don't see an awful lot of
and you love Malachi Toney, but what about the other receivers? Can they step up?
That's just it, right? If you go to the air, it's Malachi Toney, and then what else? And Indiana's proven to be good enough in the secondary to shut down one guy. Here's what I saw last week, and here's what I think will happen again, because Curt Cignetti's a very good head coach. Mike Shanahan's a very good offensive coordinator for this team. Ole Miss could not get the wheels going with any traction early. Obviously, the whole game plan, if you're going to play this defense with Mesidor and Bain and these guys that keep coming at you, is tempo, get them tired out. And when they get tired out, you start moving the football like crazy. And that's what happened in the second half. The first four drives for Ole Miss were like 3 plays and out, 3 plays and out, 2 plays and a touchdown because they had an explosive run.
I thought Ole Miss should have cranked the tempo up even more than they did in the first half. That's what I think should. I think they should have. I don't think they played as fast as you mentioned until the second half, and I think that was a bit of a mistake that I think Golding would want to do over on, and Charlie Weiss Jr., the OC.
And what you have to do in order to get to that tempo is you just got to crank out that first down, right? And Ole Miss couldn't get that first down, couple of drives. But when they started to get them, all of a sudden, that defense wasn't coming all that close to Chambliss anymore, not on a regular basis. And he's hitting receivers and they're scoring points, and they had holes to run through. I really do believe that Curt Cignetti will go to some type of tempo here, which will make it difficult for Miami. And if he gets to tempo early, and Indiana is such a productive offense, and they've been through defenses like this, right? They've been through Ohio State. Miami's not a better defense all around than Ohio State is. Great pass rush, but they're not a better defense. Indiana's seen it all. In fact, one of the kids commented this week on Indiana, I forget if it was Charlie Becker or somebody else, who said, the difference between this year and last year is this year we've got a lot of big games under our belt now, and they know what it's like. They're not going to be intimidated by this state in Miami. I totally agree. It's funny you said what you said, because I had the same thought that Indiana probably up to 10 I feel pretty good about them winning by 10. Um, and to me, that might be as close as it comes, if in fact they can they don't shoot themselves in the foot, right? I mean, that's barring a bunch of turnovers that give Miami help. Miami didn't necessarily never got untracked against A&M. Didn't really get untracked completely. The second the Mississippi game, Mississippi's D just couldn't hold up. I think we knew that going in, right? It was a pretty easy overplay in that game. So for me, I still might look over here, Ian, because I tell you the truth, I don't as good as Miami's defense is, this might sound crazy to say. I think Indiana can get to 30 plus really more often than not against this defense, to tell you the truth. And that goes with Carson Beck has played well, but Carson Beck can be forced into mistakes too. I mean, there's no doubt Indiana, that pick six to start the game last week against Dante Moore, he got shell shocked. I think he could do the same to Beck. I'll probably end up playing Indiana. I should play it now because I don't think it's coming back anytime soon, right? I don't think there's a big rush to go bet
so
Miami.
far. Yeah.
Plus 8.5. And I think that it'll get over the total. And to your point, Indiana team total might even be a safer play. But that's the way I'm looking at it. I really think there'll be tempo created by Signetti. And at that point, Miami's defense will hang on for a little bit. And if they don't hang on at all, like if Indiana scores right away like they did last week, then the dam could break loose just like it did to Oregon.
Yeah, right now, and this is where I bet it yesterday, Indiana team total over, this is the exact book I bet it at too, FanDuel. Indiana team total over 27.5 minus 122, and you get it below that key number of 28, obviously. And I think 28's doable. Don't forget, Ole Miss scored 27 last week in the game against Miami, and I think Indiana can certainly exceed that here in this game. So to ask 28 out of Indiana, I think it's doable. So I do like that Hoosiers team total here Monday night in the national championship game. Rob, great stuff. Always great having you on the Football Frenzy. Like I said, we'll try to line it up again next week for Conference Championship Sunday when we're down to the AFC and NFC championship games. But as always, we'll wrap it up with best bet from either the divisional playoff games or the college game on Monday nights. Rob, what do you like here for your best bet?
Boy, I wish at this point in time I could get to Rams-Bears over, Ian, because I feel as strongly about that over as you do. But it's going to take me a little more time to get there, so I won't release it here. What I will say is probably comes down to a couple of plays here, one or the other. I'm going to go with Buffalo-Denver over. I really think Buffalo, as I said earlier, they get theirs no matter what the circumstances. Josh Allen's going to find a way to score his points. I think Denver can exploit that defense enough, for both of these teams to get mid-20s. 24-23 wins you a total bet in this game. And to me, that sounds like a very likely final score or close to a very likely final score. So I'll go ahead and leave Buffalo-Denver as a best bet here for the show. Saturday afternoon, 4:30 East, 1:30 on the Pacific Coast.
And again, the good thing about betting that game over is weather looks fine for January it'll be 17th on Saturday. Looks fine for Denver on Saturday afternoon for that game with Bills and Broncos. I'll go to that national championship game for my best bet because, like I said, I want to give you something I've actually bet as of now. I will be probably betting. I probably would be Rams-Bears over if I had an NFL best bet, but I haven't bet that yet. I want to wait till the forecast we have an even more accurate representation of what it's going to be. So I'll give you Indiana team total over 27.5 for my best bet for this show. National championship game on Monday night. I will ask the Hoosiers to get to 28. I simply think they can. And whether it's offensively, and don't underestimate the ability for a defensive score. Hell, we saw it right at the start of the game last week against Oregon and Dante Moore. Pick 6 to the house, first play of the game. Certainly Carson Beck is, what's the word? Interceptable? I would say he is. And if that Indiana secondary wreaks havoc again in this game, either sets up the offense for a short field or returns one to the house, it would not surprise me. So multiple ways, in my opinion, we could get to 28 plus for Indiana in that game. So Indiana, team total over 27.5 for best bet. Rob, always fun. Try to get you back on next week. What do you want to add before we wrap it up? Yeah,
real quick for those watching, you can find all my work over at wagertalk.com. If you're All you have to really do there, Ian, is drop your email address and you get instant access to all the video content, written content we provide every day. Actually do a couple of shows each day, Monday through Friday. Now we've added a Saturday college basketball show, which I'll be co-host of. So you can catch college basketball action 10 to 11 Eastern AM each and every day. And you can catch me with Ski Profit, friend and colleague of both of ours, afternoon going over NBA at 1:45 in the afternoon. Other than that, good luck to everybody with their bets out there. Ian, thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure to come on and talk these games with you. And we will, we'll work out a time and we'll get back together again next week and see what we have for the conference championship games.
Let's end the show on a little bit of a comical note. Let's add some comedy here to the end of the show, because this is a funny note that I want to throw at you. I don't know if you heard about this or heard that this has happened yet, but the Hamilton Tiger Cats have a new special teams coordinator this upcoming season, and his name, Bob Dice, the former head coach of the Ottawa Red Blacks. I don't know how to react to that, other than to say I'm just glad he's not the head coach.
Yeah, he's probably a great coordinator.
I think so. That's the way I see it. And if Scott Milanovic thinks, that he's going to help on plus the special teams coordinator retired, so that's why they were in need of a new person to fill that position. So it is Bob Dice, the former head coach of the Ottawa Red Blacks, a great man from all indications that have interacted with Bob Dice. But yes, he will be the special teams coordinator for the Hamilton Ticats. And a couple rule things to mention to you, Rob. You'll be interested in this. You mentioned we're going to have that 20-second or 35-second play clock that now starts immediately after the last play ends. We're going to have that, obviously, this upcoming CFL season, but they will announce that likely, because they're trying to figure out a workaround for the last 3 minutes of the half, because they know that that's going to be a problem where 35 seconds and you're not going to get those frantic finishes. They're going to move the play clock back to the 20-second play clock inside 3 minutes, where the clock just stops after every snap, and you're going to get more plays off as a result in the last 3 minutes. So that will be back. That will remain the same. The 20-second play clock in the last 3 minutes of the first half, last 3 minutes of the second half. Outside of that, it'll be the running 35-second play clock, where we don't have to worry about, 20 seconds, count the people on the field, and then the referees wind in the play clock. That is going to be, the new play clock for everything outside the last 3 minutes of the half. And I love it, because now we're still going to get those great finishes where there'll be more plays, more snaps, more opportunities for possessions and plays, and ultimately comebacks late in the game in the last 3 minutes of the half. So I like the way the commissioners approached it with the play clock next year. Very good all around.
Yeah, way to skirt around the biggest reason why we love that new rule change. Yes. Both of those rule changes. And we don't want, our friends on the other side of the counter to be aware early on next year.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sure all of you can figure that out exactly. Why we're excited about the new play clock going into effect, and how they have decided to handle the last 3 minutes of the half inside the 3-minute warning, as it's called in the CFL. So I'm telling you, I'm already counting down the days. Like I'm telling you, 1, 2, 4 months, and training camp is opening in the CFL early May. We're going to start seeing training camps. So like I said, that'll be here before you know it as well. Great stuff, as always, with Rob Vino. Hit the like button, everyone watching on YouTube. And thanks for joining us. For Rob Vino, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy the games and good luck with the divisional playoff round in the NFL and the College Football National Championship. And we will see you again next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.